Alright, hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I am joined by a really special guest. This is Challice from Sodbuster Living.
Hello!
Hello! If you don't already know Challice from Sodbuster Living, I encourage you to check out her channel. Her link is in the description box below, as well as up here somewhere, as well as at the end of this video. So today, we are going to be talking about some of the differences between the Charlotte Mason philosophy and the Waldorf philosophy, and not just the differences, we're also going to be talking about the similarities.
Yep.
Yeah, so since neither of us really planned this, we don't have a list of questions, so undoubtedly we're going to miss some really phenomenal questions that you're going to wonder why we didn't address them. Don't worry, you can check the description box below because we have all that information there because we kind of are thinking ahead, as homeschoolers do.
Sure. Right.
All right. He's like, I'll go with that. So let's start with a couple of the similarities. How about we start there?
Because that spurs on questions.
I think so.
Okay.
And actually, I think the differences are really interesting too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to miss some of the differences. But what would you say, based on just your information, what would you say is one of the similarities between the two philosophies?
I think it still focuses on the parent and child thing, and you're working together and you're doing school together, not, well, kind of like what I was talking earlier. Here's the schoolwork, go do it and come back here if you have any questions. No, you're working together, and the student also sees the teacher learning.
Yes, that is really profound.
I think both of those do with it. I mean, okay, who here has done Plutarch? And you go to teach Plutarch to your Charlotte Mason student.
Maybe you can expand on that.
Plutarch is very big with Charlotte Mason. You must do Plutarch's Lives. You know, it's great. It's a citizenship kind of class. I don't know. And you go and you sit down and you're like, I have no idea who this guy was. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be teaching you. And what is this language? Because he was Greek.
Okay. Way
back in like the 70 AD or something. So your child, you hand that to your child. You have to work that with your child.
Yeah.
And with Waldorf, it's kind of the same thing. Geometry, you're sitting down. I'm pulling out of the hat here, by the way.
Well, we can go back to Greek history, Roman history, Greek mythology. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing in the Waldorf philosophy. And I am also, it just reminded me, I'm going to link a podcast down below from the Live Education Waldorf Homeschool Conference that I attended recently. And one of the speakers there said, and it's so profound, it was so profound that it actually became like a legendary quote within those few days of the conference.
Oh, wow.
And he basically said, I don't teach Roman history. I use Roman history to teach what it means to be a citizen and how to use rhetoric. And that was so profound because we are not teaching these things. We're using these things to teach far better things.
Yes.
So that's, I think, at the heart of both philosophies. One of the main differences that I see between the two philosophies, and I think it's at the most surface thing, the first thing that you see that is a main difference, are the materials that you're going to use, or how you're going to present those materials. And in Charlotte Mason, you're dealing with living books, and you are reading those books. And in Waldorf, you are not, you still can use the living books, but you're actually, as a teacher, reading the material first, absorbing the material, digesting it, processing it, and then bringing it forward to the students from yourself. Now, I like both ways, and I'll tell you, when I don't have time to prepare, I am Charlotte Mason all the way. But can you talk about some of the reasons why in the Charlotte Mason philosophy, there's so much about using the living books and using the classics and using great literature?
Well, have you ever taken a book where one person is reading one book and everybody in like a book club has a different viewpoint on it?
That is a good point.
And in a Charlotte Mason thing, I, the teacher, can teach them, but if the child reads the book, then they're going to narrate that big word in Charlotte Mason. They're going to narrate maybe something different than what I would have taught. So when you are processing and doing everything, you're regurgitating or whatever the word is. That almost sounds vile, but okay. You are putting back into them what you got from it, and you're trying to teach them because you're teaching them in the way that you can process. But the child with the Charlotte Mason is reading for themselves and processing what they're getting from it.
And this is what's really difficult about choosing books. I know that you share books and I share books, and what works for me may not work for you, and what works for you may not work for me. That's okay. There isn't a set amount of books or any particular kind of book that's going to be a classic. It's what's going to work for you, which can be very difficult for somebody who's new to Charlotte Mason.
Right.
When you're trying to evaluate what is a living book, what is a classic, what kind of materials do I use.
Is this twaddle? That seems to be a really hard one for new ones. Is this twaddle?
Yeah, I agree. And I'll tell you about twaddle. Sometimes you know something is not working, but you don't have the terminology to explain it. You can't articulate why it's not working. And twaddle is the perfect example of that. When you've got literature, I don't even want to call it literature, when you got books
reading material,
you know the kind. You know, because you can respond to it almost in a, it's not jiving with it. Yeah.
That was it?
Yeah.
Where's the meat?
And it's not going to work for you. Don't waste your time with that kind of stuff. Now, sometimes kids will still enjoy that stuff. What's your opinion about that?
I think I talked about this in my last video. It's like a piece of candy. Once in a while, now and then, it's not going to harm you. If you had a daily dose of candy, your body's not going to be able to handle it properly. It's not healthy for it.
Okay. That's a good point. Here's another difference, and then we'll talk about some more similarities. What I found, what I liked about both the Charlotte Mason philosophy and the Waldorf philosophy are that they both had an opinion about food. Did you know this? I'm sure you knew that.
The bread and milk and simple and...
Yes, and mutton, which took me forever to realize it was lamb. Lamb. Right? Charlotte Mason talks about keeping the food simple, and the Waldorf philosophy talks about keeping it varied. Now, you can do whichever one you want. The fact is, I just appreciate that both philosophies have an opinion about this. And it reminds me that these philosophies are talking about the whole entire child and the parent-child dynamic and the teacher-child dynamic and the whole raising of the child. And it's not just academics.
They both have valid points.
They do, yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, yeah, we're going to do more variety. You need to know everything. And sometimes I'm like, we're kind of in a rut. Let's go back to simple. We're kind of getting too much here. And we'll both enjoy it. And then we enjoy the more exotic things back.
Do you feel it's okay to be Charlotte Mason one day and Waldorf another and classical the next?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, again, I'm going back to thinking of the whole child. And if the whole child is mom is saying,
I was about to say,
then I think
when you want to focus on the child, you absolutely also have to focus on yourself, because the child doesn't live in absence of you as a parent or as a teacher, and so you need to fulfill your needs as much as you're fulfilling their needs, right? Okay, let's talk about some other really wonderful highlights about each of these philosophies that you're not necessarily going to find either in the public school system or traditional education. What are some of the really amazing highlights about both philosophies? I'll share mine, and if you wouldn't mind sharing.
I think the biggest one is just being out in nature.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Students are put into a classroom and segregated to age groups, whereas even Charlotte Mason and Waldorf, it's not, I don't think it's a predominant thing like everybody thinks of it, but you have all ages and all grades working together at their various levels that they can together. You don't have that separation where children can't really mingle and work together and learn from each other, and outdoors. Yeah,
the outdoors is really important in both philosophies. Now, Charlotte Mason, actually maybe you can help me understand this a little better. Now, she was primarily a tutor, right, for individuals. Did she also set up a school?
She did set up a school. Okay, but I think that was later on.
Did she have mixed grades in the school? Okay,
it was a grade school.
Great. But did she teach with were there multiple grades within one classroom? Was she
that I don't know.
Okay, because
I think so.
Okay,
but I don't know. I would have to look up the PENU.
But one of her books is titled Home Education, but not necessarily homeschooling, right?
Right.
Because homeschooling is more of a recent phenomenon, even though it kind of has its roots in something that's very old. I think the idea and how we apply it today is fairly modern. But
if you think of it, look at the whole world out there and look at where we are here. I mean, of course, there is more out there to learn than there is here. You can almost create a bubble.
You certainly can.
And out there, it's a part of us.
It does feed part of our soul that we may not be able to fully recognize unless there is an absence of it.
Which kind of brings the whole religious or spiritualism
absolutely.
into it. And that's where they're both, not to get sidetracked, but it still works together.
Let's circle into the spirituality, but I want to go back to nature and also the mixed grades, or the separate grades. In the Waldorf philosophy, the Waldorf philosophy was born out of a public school movement. It wasn't necessarily for homeschoolers, and you'll get a lot of really pure Waldorf people who really adhere to the philosophy purely, saying it's not intended for a homeschool environment. And they have valid points, but you know, we're still going to homeschool with whatever we can that's Waldorf inspired. But primarily in the school system, it was divided by grades pretty strongly, except kindergarten probably had about a 2-year age range. But all the other grades were very much focused on that particular age group because of all the development that is going on. So maybe you could have maybe 2 grade levels, but you're not going to have as much of a variety as we have in our homeschool and what you have in your homeschool. And the curriculum is going to respond to those different ages and those different developments with material that is appropriate for that grade level. Now, the nature part is so important because also in the Waldorf philosophy, you're looking at not just being in nature and experiencing things that are primary, you are also going to be working with those materials in the classroom. And again, you're working with things that are like wool or beeswax or wood or those kinds of things that are
the natural world.
And they're naturally drawing you back into the natural world. And drawing that into spirituality, I feel like the reason why it's so important is, and what I really love about both philosophies, is that you have a core of spirituality. Now, we know a number of homeschoolers that do Charlotte Mason that do either have a religion different than Charlotte Mason or have no religion at all, yet they can still apply the philosophy. What I love is that you can it kind of, I feel, has these little markers within the whole education that remind you where you need to bring some spirituality into it. And I really appreciate that.
I just had a thought with the whole, the grades with the thing. You know, if you think about how you narrate, so you read a passage and they narrate. I mean, that's where I would really think that you've got the full grades there because everybody's taking their different things. So that's probably where I got the whole everybody is not separated.
Which is awesome, because then you're doing one lesson for multiple grades.
Now we know my secret. That's why I'm doing this.
No, but it's brilliant. It's brilliant because then you have again, one lesson that meets the needs of multiple grades and multiple children. And this idea of narration, let's expand on that because maybe people don't know fully. Can you explain the different forms of what narration is and the different forms of narration that are in the Charlotte Mason philosophy?
Well, you have narration as in telling back. It's called telling back, whereas you have it in a voice form or a written form. And the younger one is they're just going to tell you in their own words. I mean, that's so stressed, not a question, okay, what happened on page 35, paragraph 2? It's, what do you remember? And that's what they're taking from the story. Now, some days it can be, there's a guy named Ned. And some days it's Ned jumped on a horse and went down the street and saw a cat. You know, it's just depending on the day what they're going to take from it. And then the older ones, as they're writing, they're forming a thought process that's kind of preparing them for later. You know, when you think about grammar and then composition and everything, they're building on that. And so that's pretty much where what narration is.
When do you incorporate picture narration?
So I haven't gotten that far yet.
You see, because that's something that I love the picture narration.
I love it. Because of her, I'm learning to do more of that because I never considered myself an artist. I could do stick figures.
You know what? I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on that one. I saw your artwork recently.
Which one?
The mushrooms.
Mushrooms.
When we did the art challenge back in April.
Okay.
And you did great.
Yeah, did you see this bird?
I think you did great with the bird too.
Okay, so those are the only 2 that I've ever done that I've been proud of.
Okay, but you know what? But you did them.
I did them.
You did them.
That was the biggest thing, is that I did them. And I felt confident, and you don't see half the other stuff I do because I'm like, It's a learning experience, okay. I need a little work on that one.
But maybe you can share your experience of how you felt once you were done doing that. Like, I know when I'm done with an art project, like a chalk drawing or a drawing in a main lesson book that I'm doing along with my child, I love it. I love looking back on it. I love the whole, I don't necessarily like the initial experience of looking at a blank piece of paper and agonizing over what's going to go on that blank piece of paper. When I am doing a picture drawing, when I'm doing picture narration, or, you know, just for our main lesson book, when I'm looking at a blank page, it's a little bit scary, overwhelming, a little bit stressful, because I'm also not an artist, but I will do my best to copy, for instance. And I have to.
Copy work, I'm pretty sure that's it.
Yeah, I wonder where we got that from.
You're all done?
Cheers,
okay.
sweetheart. Once I do that, and once I'm done with that process, I love going back to my work. It is such a joy to go back to my work. Did you also enjoy going back to the drawings that you did?
I think so. I would have to say the milkweed is kind of like that narration what you were talking about, and it just made me think. We did a milkweed bug. So we looked up this bug that we have. It's native to our area. Ugliest thing ever. And I was like, okay, let's find out what this is. And so we looked it up, and we're like, okay, let's draw it. Let's see what characteristics we find. And that, it was narrating, and everybody's looked different. I focused on the orange parts, and everybody was focusing on the eyes, and Ben had to make sure it had 8 legs, or whatever it was. I don't,
That's sweet.
apparently I don't narrated that because I was focused on the orange.
Right, and that's okay,
But,
right?
Yes, and so that was our form of the art narration. Like you were...
Do you ever have to correct if it's something that's totally wrong? Do you correct it, or you just let it be?
Right now, I'm letting it be.
Okay.
I know that you're supposed to, you know, perfect practice makes perfect, or whatever that is. I do have sensitive children, and they are perfect. Or Stephen, the boy, the oldest boy, he doesn't like to draw.
No,
yes,
he's 8. He's 8.
And he doesn't like to draw because if it's not done perfectly, he's not going to do it. And so even if it's not perfect, I'm constantly, thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And that's probably a little bit more flexible. It's not even Waldorf, it's not even Charlotte Mason, it's just mom.
Exactly. And you have to do that. You cannot fit your children into the philosophy. You have to let your children be who they are, and then as a parent, as a teacher, as a guide in education, then you pull those things out that you can work with and gently guide those things that you feel like they need a little help with.
Right.
And that's our job as parents and homeschoolers and teachers, and you know that's what we're here to do. This is what I love. This is in both philosophies. You've got in the Waldorf philosophy, you also have your oral narration, your written narration, and your picture narration, which, you know, it's part of the main lesson book. Actually, I want to say almost every lesson has some kind of drawing. Mine tend to be a little bit more elaborate, which means I can't do them as often, which I really need. That's personal. I need to work on that and make some that are a little bit more simple so that we can have more of them, because I noticed that my children, number one, they love to look back at their main lesson books, and that's a natural review process.
Right.
There's no angst in doing that. And like I say all the time, none of my kids look back at a math worksheet and go, oh, remember when we did that math worksheet? Oh, I loved it.
Yes.
But they look back at their main lesson books and
it's in their own words. And math is not in their words.
No, and not a worksheet either.
No, it's answers. It's
right. I mean, any worksheet. It could be a history worksheet. It could be whatever it is. It's somebody else's writing that they're filling in. When they do their own original work, they are responding to it on a level that sometimes we can't exactly explain. I feel it's from the heart, and that is going to go farther with them. It's going to speak deeper with them, and that's just
and it's their character.
Beauty.
You can start seeing their character.
Yeah, it's
which, of course, I'm sorry, bringing Charlotte Mason into this.
Absolutely. So let's talk about one more similarity between the two philosophies, and that's on habits and rhythms or routines. And these are things, in my opinion, that are sometimes hard to lock down and define. And as much as I know them, they're even more difficult to actually apply in my life. So let's talk about habits first, because I absolutely love the way Charlotte Mason describes habits in her book. We'll leave that link in the description box below so that you can find out which book we're talking about in her 6 original volumes. And always we're talking about her 6 original volumes because they are superb. They are classics. What I love, love, love about habits, number one, in her book, is that it's never getting your kids to do something. It's more about working together for what you're trying to achieve. And so she says to the child, I'm going, we're going to close the door after ourselves. Like, you know, and this is back like in the, what, 18 something. So it was like we need to close the door to prevent a draft. But us, we want to close the door to prevent
flies.
Flies. You want to keep the windows open for the breeze.
For the convenience.
You want to close the door for the flies. So you're going to tell your child, we're going to close the door, and you know we're going to do this. But I'm going to help you do this, and I'm going to remind you when you forget, so that we can work together. You know, it's together. And I'll tell you that it takes tremendous will on a parent's part not to be like, I told you to close the door. Like, how many times I have to tell you?
Why are you closing?
I know.
Why are you yelling? Oh, why are you yelling?
I know. We've all been there, and that's okay, because
everything.
That's the way it is. But she gives some really good markers. She's saying, I'm going to help you do this. It's going to take a period of time. And you're going to see your child is finally going to get it because you have helped him achieve that. And then there'll be one day when he forgets to close the door. And you're going to be like, oh, but little Johnny was so good about closing it every other day. And he just forgot this one time, and I'll let it go. And in that moment, you undo so much of the work that you've already done. And that's the difficult part as parents.
Right again?
Yeah, gosh, our mothers. So that's where I love the idea of habits, the way that she talks about forming them and sticking with them. And once they are so firm in you, they are a force of habit, you're not going to leave them.
Have you ever read The Power of Habit?
No.
It's a book. Imagine that. I've read The Power of Habit. But it's this whole book on what our whole lives are a responsive habit. You get up and your habit is to do this. You get up, your mind is not capable of trying to think everything you have to do each morning. And that's what you're trying to put into your children. If you put into them the good habits, then it's not, their habit isn't going to be these bad habits over accumulation of years.
Yeah. Actually, you brought up a really good point. You're not deciding every morning to do these things. You want to relieve the burden of decision making for your children.
Yes.
And this is not a negative thing. We're not like, oh, be robots. That's not what it's saying at all. It's
but
that
if these are done, then you can be yourself. Because you're not having to stop, do what needs to be done, and get back.
Right.
That habit is, so it's a continuous play, okay?
And you probably don't even realize when you are not thinking about these things anymore because it's so automatic. But imagine if every morning you had to think, okay, what time should I wake up today? And what should I eat for breakfast? Although, maybe we do that anyway. Or what should we wear? Which
we think we have to eat breakfast. That's a habit. Oh, it's morning. I need to eat breakfast.
Well, you're absolutely right. I really love breakfast, but that's maybe something I don't have to do. The point is that the habits are there for multiple reasons. one, to create those good habits that you want to have in your life, and two, to alleviate the whole burden of decision making on the things that you don't have to burden yourself with. These small little decision making things. There was a time when I got really good about all of my habits, and it was like clockwork. I
know. I miss that day.
I know. I'm here. I'll tell you two things that disrupted that. I don't know about how it was disrupted for you, but two things. Moving disrupted a lot of my habits, and the other thing was putting those chores on my children, because now I don't have to do as many of them anymore. Your children are almost getting there.
Pregnant.
Yeah, having more of those little beautiful children kind of disrupts those habits. Absolutely. That's a shift in environment, which means that sometimes you have to start from scratch again and reestablish those habits, which is so hard.
But it also is both Waldorf and Charlotte Mason, those habits, because it still is a child development. With Charlotte Mason, if you are perfect, that perfect homeschool mom, and has started from the beginning, the first 6 years are forming those habits.
Exactly.
And then just the next 6 years are making sure that they're continuous regardless of all the different changes that are happening.
Right.
And then later on, it's okay, habits are there. Now you can focus on the heavier things of life. Absolutely.
And this shouldn't feel like if you have a 10-year-old child already, don't feel like, oh, I've lost my chance. Like, you have plenty of opportunities.
Jumping all the habits on top of them.
Exactly. One at a time.
One at a time.
Absolutely. And the other thing that is so important to realize is that sometimes your the absence of teaching habits actually is teaching a whole different set of habits.
Yes.
So we should be mindful
Yes.
of that as well. The things that we do inadvertently are teaching habits to our children. We need to be mindful that our challenges, as much as they are part of our own growth, we need to remember that little eyes are on us all the time. And they
Are they ever? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So in Waldorf, we have the same idea about habits. They are established in a similar way through the rhythms and the routines. So in having these routines on a daily basis, you are naturally encouraging the will to do these things, which are the habits, that you then don't have to think about them. So like every day you're getting up and you're doing this, and then you're starting with this part of your lesson or your review, or you're creating this habit through the routine and through the natural rhythms of the day, as well as the rhythms that you create, which is something that's very big in the Waldorf philosophy. Your rhythms of the taking in and the releasing, the inhale, the exhale, so that you're not doing so much of one thing at one time. You're kind of balancing it out throughout the day, which is really important. However, I find that sometimes we all have different rhythms, and you would think it's hard, and you would think in a homeschool environment that you had a little more flexibility, but when you're just dealing with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 children and then an adult, versus a whole classroom, you're actually dealing with, I feel, more challenges in a homeschool environment when it comes to rhythms and routines.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
It is.
We rock.
And I feel like we have the opportunity to do something individual, and then we're all individuals trying to work that out together.
Well, I think that's our advantage as being homeschooled. We're not trying to put everybody in that box.
Yeah.
Children's habits for a public school, I mean, people that go and do public school, they are making the best decision for their family.
Absolutely.
For me, I am seeing that as that's their habit. Wake up, go sit, come home, sit again, eat, go to bed.
Yeah.
And you've got video games to kind of turn your mind off.
Yeah.
That's not a habit or routine or a lifestyle I want my children to have.
Yeah. So that's what we have for you so far today. Don't forget to check the description box below for more information about both philosophies, as well as a link to Challice's channel, Sodbuster Living, where you can find an entire series on the Charlotte Mason philosophy. And of course, you can find a lot of videos on the Waldorf philosophy here on my channel.
Of course.
Linked here are both of our channels, so I hope that you will check out Sodbuster Living as well as my channel, and you have an opportunity to do that right now. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Till next time.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.